Welcome to this new tutorial about Lua coding in FicsIt-Networks. Today we're going to talk about control statements. Control statements are used to control the flow of your program. For example, if you have a condition, like if a storage container has a given amount of items in it, you want to split up your flow of program so that you can, for example, do thing A if a given condition is fulfilled and do thing B if that's not the case. This simple condition checking is also called an if statement because we check if a given condition is true or false. So first of all, let's create a new local variable which we call var, and in there we have to store a Boolean value. So that's very important. If conditions, as said, condition if true or false have to be used with Boolean values. So we're gonna use true here. So next is we're gonna add the keyword if. So we say, okay, we want to now have if condition, and in there we can now provide a condition. Any kind of expression that evaluates down to a Boolean would be called a condition. So for example, if var, that's totally fine already because var gets evaluated down to a Boolean, and if that Boolean is true, the next stuff gets executed, and if it's false, that won't happen. So now we have to finish up our if statement with a then. So that means, okay, if this expression gets evaluated down to true, then do following thing, and that is, for example, print hey. Yeah. And then we have to end this, so because like if we say now print meep, we want to say, okay, it doesn't matter what if the condition var is true or false, we always want to print meep. But if var is true, we want to first print hey and then print meep. Okay, but it should not matter here if var is true or false. So for that we have to end the if statement with the end keyword. So that means everything between then and end gets executed only if var gets evaluated down to true. So if we're gonna run that code now, you can see we get a hey and then followed by a meep. If we change the condition now to false, you can see, okay, we only got now just meep because the stuff inside of this if did not get executed. We can expand it further up. There is so for example, we create now a second variable, so var 1 and var 2, and we say true 1. So and then so now what we're gonna say is, okay, first we want to check if this condition is true. If that is not the case, we want to check if our other condition is true. So for that we're gonna use else, and we say var 2 then, and then we can print a second thing like okay. So what this here essentially means, it goes here and then checks first, is this condition var 1 true? If that's the case, it prints hey and then ignores everything else and continues down here after the end. But if var gets evaluated down to false, print hey doesn't get executed, it now instead first checks if it can do this condition. If it can do that condition, it then prints okay and then continues with the print meep. But if that condition var 2 is also false, nothing of the above will happen and we will just print meep. So this also means that like if the above condition, this var 1 up here, is evaluated down to true and it runs, it will ignore the lower part, so it doesn't run okay. So that means if var 1 is true and var 2 would be also true, okay would not be executed because it just does the above. If we want to, let me just show you pretty quickly. So if we do the both, you can see we only print hey and then followed by the meep that will happen anytime. But if we now turn var 1 to false, it will print okay instead. Because this here doesn't get executed, it checks instead var 2 and that is true, so it does okay instead. Very simple. So That means, like, if we have both true, OK doesn't get executed. But what if we still want to do that? Well, very simple. You just end the if condition above and continue with a second, its own condition. Because we said the if statement ends with the end keyword, and after that we essentially have a new if statement. And that means if var is now true, it will print hey. And if var and then continues to this line here. But if var is false, var1 is false, it won't print hey, but still goes to that line and continues from there. So that means now it doesn't matter if var1 is true or false, it will always check if var2 is true or false, so that it can then print OK or not. So we're gonna run that code, you can see it now prints hey and OK, because both are true. If we now set like var1 to false, you can see it still does the exact same. So then the nice thing about this is you can essentially list that up. You can have an infinite amount of else if statements here. So you can go with a var3 or something, and then do a third thing or whatever, and then continue onwards. It's just that this condition will only be checked if all the above if and else if statements have been evaluated down to false and have not executed anything. There is also one more thing, like what if you want to say, okay, if nothing of the above statements has worked, I want to still be able to execute something else, but only if all the above conditions have failed. So for that, instead of writing else, if you just write else, you don't even need a then, just write else, and then you say oh. So that means only if all the above statements have not been evaluated to true. If no condition is fulfilled, only then it will print O. Okay, so you will see now it won't print hey, it will print OK because var2 is true, and var3 is then and else is ignored since var2 got it. You can see we print OK. So if you turn it true as before, it ignores that completely. If you now change that to false, you will see it will print third because this condition is not fulfilled, so this won't execute it. That means it tries the next else if. This condition is also not fulfilled, so it won't execute that. So it will try to run the next condition. var3 will evaluate it down to true, so it will print third. So if we're gonna run that, see third. Nice. And the me from down there. But if now all of them are false, if no condition of above is fulfilled, it will instead do something else, and that is print O. Ta-da! And it prints O. So for this simple structure, we can check for different kinds of conditions, if something is fulfilled or not, and then decide what part of the program we want to execute and what not. So right now we have talked mostly about what happens if we have a variable that contains a boolean and then put it into this condition of the if statement. But we haven't figured out how we can say if we, for example, get a number from a storage container, like the amount of items in the storage container, how we can then check if it is a given amount, if it is a given number, or if it's bigger than a different number, or stuff like that. Comparison operators. We have to have a look at comparison operators because those allow us to check if specific things are different things. So for that, we're gonna store, we have to get, like, first of all, a value we want to check for a given attribute, for a given thing. So for example, let's work with a number. So we're gonna take the number 10. So we're gonna check, okay, we want to check if the number is exactly 10. Okay, so that's so for that we have to use the equal operator. This checks for equality of the left and right operand. So it evaluates down this here to a value, which will be the number 10, and then checks if it's the same as the thing it will evaluate down on the right side here. So we can, for example, use a different variable like number 2, but we can also use a different number like this. So this whole thing will be evaluated down to a Boolean value. So it will check is the number in the variable num the same as the number 10, and this will be true. So it will execute yay. But if it's, for example, 9, those two numbers are not the same, it will evaluate down to false, so yay won't be printed, as you can see there. What we can also do is we can check if the number is smaller or equal to 10. So we can use smaller or equal, like the smaller than, and then equal to. So if we run that, we'll see yay, because that's the case. 10 is also allowed because it's equal to 10. 10 is equal to 10. But 11 will be evaluated down to false. And yay won't be printed. So we can also check if it's always smaller than. So it means 10 won't be evaluated down to true. So you can see there. We can also use bigger than. That also works. You can see nothing happens here. So we would have to write 11 because 11 is greater than 10. So it will print yay. Or we use greater or equal to. So then 10 is also allowed. You can see, prints yay. We also can check if it's that number is not 10. So for that we're gonna use the tilde equal. So since 10 is the equal to 10, this will be evaluated down to false. But if it's any other number like a 9, it will evaluate down to true. So it says yay. Same counts for 11. So 11 would be true. Ta-da! Important to notice that this here doesn't have to happen in a if condition. So you can also just simply go and say local b, it's a variable called b, and we store that stuff in here. So, and then we're gonna print that. So this here simply gets evaluated down to a Boolean. And so that means, since that's now a Boolean value, we can use it everywhere else where we have to use a value expression, like assigning a variable. So if we're gonna do that, you can see it prints true, because in B we now have a Boolean value true. A Boolean value can be true or false. And through that, we can now use that multiple times anywhere else and stuff like that. Also, on a side note, same counts for strings. So you can like for or most other, like you can also use floating point numbers. That also works. You could even do it with Boolean values themselves. But you can also use strings. So for example, if we say we have a string meep, then we can say if the string is equal to test, then print yay. This won't be the case, so it won't print yay. But if we change the string now to test, those two strings are the same, and it will print yay. Next up are the logic operators. So imagine you want to check if two conditions are true, only then you want to print yay. So only if condition 1 is true and condition 2 is true, then I want to print yay. So a very simple approach you might think of right now would be to say, okay, you have if condition 1 is true, then do following thing, and in here I check then again if condition 2 is true, and only then it will print yay. So we can run that. So you can see only condition 1 is true right now, so it won't print yay. But if we now change additionally condition 2 to true, it will print yay. Condition 1 false, won't print yay. But that's rather inefficient and a lot of text to write. So what you can do instead is use a logic operator. So how do you do that? So there are 3 main types of logic operators: the AND operator, the OR operator, and the NOT operator. Let's begin with the AND operator. The AND operator is the keyword AND, and then you can have a Boolean expression on the right side and a Boolean expression on the left side. So you can say condition 1 and condition 2, and it will then evaluate down those two values, and then it will check, okay, if this here is the case, and this here is the case. So if this here is true and this here is true, the whole expression, the whole AND expression here I marked, will be evaluated down to true. Only if the left side gets evaluated down to true and the right side gets evaluated down to true. Only then we ourselves will also be true. So if we run that, you can see it won't print anything because it only will return true if both things are true. And we have a yay. Instead, there is also the OR operator. The OR operator will check if this condition is true, the whole OR expression will be true, or the condition 2 is true, then the whole OR operation is true. Okay, so if either of those two are true or both are true, then the OR operation itself will be returned true. So it will only return false if none of the conditions above are true. So if we're gonna run that, you can see it will print yay. If we now if only one has true, it will still print yay. But if both are false, then it won't print yay. And then there is also the not operator, which you can, which you have to write as a prefix to your condition, and this will essentially just flip it. So if condition 1 is false, not will then return true. If condition 1 is true, not will evaluate down to false. So that means since condition 1 is false, not will flip it, so it will evaluate down to true. We will now print yay. But if we change that now to true, the opposite of true is false. So since not flips condition 1 from true to false, evaluates down to false, the if condition is not fulfilled, and we won't print yay. You can now stack those up. You can stack multiple things up as you want to, but you should then begin to start using brackets. It makes clearer for you when something gets evaluated down and when not, because for you might not directly see, okay, does now first this here get evaluated, like the not condition 1, or does it first do the condition 1 and the condition 2? And how does it relate with the OR? Does first condition 1 or condition 2 get happens first this calculation, this expression, or the condition 1 and condition 1 there? You are not quite sure about that, so that's rather it's rather good if you try to start using brackets there, because with that you can make it a little bit more explicit when something happens first. So with these brackets, you say, okay, first we say the condition 1 not, then we say and the condition. So what happens down here, we do the AND operation with condition 1 there, and this value then gets done with an OR operation with the condition 2. I mean, right now it doesn't make really much sense since we have condition 1 here and there, so this will always return to false, but never mind. It's just like showing you should then start using brackets here, so it makes clearer for you when something happens and when not. Also, something very funny you can do with the logic operators is not using them with Boolean variables, but these allow you to do some very implicit if condition statements, which will allow you to write simpler code. So for example, you can say var1 or var2. So now you may ask, okay, what will it do? Okay, that's very simple. It will check first if var1 is a value not equal to nil. That's the case, and then the OR operation will return that value. But if var1 is nil, it will instead then simply return what is inside of var2. So if we're gonna run that code now, you can see it will print test, because it sees, okay, var1 gets evaluated down to string test, so that's not nil, so we're gonna use that instead. But if var1 is now nil, okay, and we run that code, you can see it uses the 10 instead from over there. If you use an AND instead, you can then say, okay, only if those two values are the same, if var1 and var2 are the same, then it will return var1. But if they are not the same, it uses the value in var2 instead. So with using or and here with non-Boolean variables, you can have some implicit if conditions, allowing you to write some simpler code, not having to write big if statements and stuff like that. Now let's have a look at loops. Loops are used to essentially rerun a code you have already written. For example, let's say you want to print test as long as the variable 1 is true, so that you have some code down there that maybe changes var1 to false, and then you want to stop printing test. Okay? So for that you can use the while loop, the while do loop. So a while loop essentially takes now a condition in here, like var1, and it says, okay, everything between do and a end keyword here will be executed over and over again as long as this condition is true. So that means it will go in here, it will start, okay, while loop, so it checks the condition. Is the condition true? Okay, then I'm gonna do the stuff between the do and the end, so I'm gonna print test. After that, I check again, is the condition true? If that's the case, I'm gonna do that again. Then it goes back up and checks, is the condition true? No, it's not true, so it will stop and do the stuff after the end, so it will print meep. In the initial run, so if we have, say, okay, assign var1 to true, and then we reach the, or let's say assign var1 to false, we reach the while and it says, okay, checks the condition var1 is false, so nothing happens and it will jump directly to the meep, so there won't be ever printed test. Never ever. There won't be a printed test. So if we're gonna run it, you can see we print a meep, but if we say true, this will always evaluate down to true, so we will print test over and over again. Our program will never exit because the condition is always true and it reaches never the end of the file, so it also will never print meep. So if we're gonna run that, you can see prints a lot of tests over and over again. So if we want to like change, if we want to end the condition there, you have to, if you want to end this loop, we have now two ways to do that. So first of all, you can simply say, you can simply change the values that are used in the condition up here. So in this case, that would mean we change the variable 1 to false. It will only print one test because after one run, we have assigned var1 with false, and the new condition check will return false, so it ignores the loop and exits out of there. A different option will be if you have, for example, a ifs or whatever in there, and then you use the break keyword. The break keyword, it's not highlighted, but the break keyword essentially breaks a loop no matter what. So if a condition up here is still fulfilled with true, you can use but your program in here then runs into a break keyword. It will break the loop anyway. So if we're gonna run that, you can see it again just prints one test, because then it breaks the loop and it will exit out of there and continue with the next step. The big difference here though is everything after the break keyword will also be ignored. So we can say hello here, and after the break keyword, it will exit out of the loop right away. So it will ignore everything after that, like the print hello. You can see no print hello there. Let's say you want to run a given code a couple of times, like you don't want to check for a condition all the time, but instead you want to say, okay, I want to execute this piece of code 10 times, for example. For that, you can use a so-called for loop, or you can create some structure like with a variable I and the while loop that then checks that stuff, or you use a for loop that allows you to make it very easy and quickly. So for that, we use for as keyword. Then we have to create assign a new variable to to a starting value like 1, and then we say till which amount we want to iterate to. So 10. So it means we want to run the for loop now from the number 1 till the number 10. And now, after a second comma, we have to tell in which step increments. So if we want like with each go through, do we want to increment I by 1 or by 2, or by what value we want to increment it? And we say 1. Now we have to like in a while loop, we say do and then end, and then everything in between will be executed as long as I is essentially smaller than 10. So it will now go through and say, okay, I equals 1, and then iterates through here, then increments I by 1, so it's now 2, and checks if it's 10. That's not the case, so it will continue till I is 10. And we can even print I. So if we're gonna do that, we can use I within this loop body in here. So if you're gonna do that, you can see it prints test1 till test 10, and after that 10 gets we increment our I, which is 10, by 1, and that's now larger than 10, so it will exit out of the for loop, and we will continue with our meet. But same as in while loops, you can still have a condition in here. For example, we can now add a condition if I equals 5, then we want to break the loop execution. So that means it will now break after having printed test 5. Ta-da! It will completely ignore it. And just to show you, like, it won't print it will ignore everything afterwards. So here you see test 1 okay, test 2 okay, test 3 okay, test 4 okay, test 5 no okay, because the break keyword skips everything after it till the end of the for loop, because like you can see, this end is part of the if statement, and this end is the ending of the for loop. So you have to count there, essentially, the control statements and the end keywords. So this was the introduction to control statements, like a if condition, else if condition, a for loop and a while loop inside of Lua, and how you can use it to make your program way more dynamic and have decisions happening inside of your code based on external factors, like how many items are in a container. I want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to do something for each item in the container, or whatever. You can come up with completely own systems and decision-making rules inside of your programs. We also had a look into a comparison operators to check given values, strings and numbers, how they behave, like what values are they bigger than some other value or whatever. And we have also had a look on logic operators to check if two conditions are true, or if one of two conditions are true, and stuff like that. How you can combine multiple conditions into one and then work with that. So I was Peyruis from Code.de from Meizong, and I say bye bye until next time, and as always, keep coding!